gets here and Enbridge shows up. This is Dr. Ott right here getting off the train.
So I just like to document this stuff because I was about 50 websites. I'm probably around 75 now. I got tens of thousands of people that see this on Facebook. And the reason why this is important is because we have to let everybody know what's going on. These oil companies are in the Gulf covering up oil. They're here covering up oil, Yellowstone, and they're polluting our country. And a lot of these oil companies aren't from here. Like BP is from Britain. Well, they used a chemical down there to sink oil because it costs them $4,200 per gallon every time they find a gallon of oil. So they want to sink it. They don't want to find it. And the problem is that chemical is illegal in Britain, but they're using it on U.S. soil and in our waters, and it's killing all of our fish and killing a lot of people down there. And Riki Ott just came from that area, and I want to thank you for coming. I appreciate this. It means a lot to us. We have 3 speakers tonight, and we have one that lives right next to the spill, and he, I can't say how much he got, but he's 700 feet away, and he got tens and tens of thousands of dollars because he's super sick. And he's 700 feet away. A lot of you are 200 feet away and you didn't get any money, or $250. So he lives right next to the spill. Then we have 2 other people that, I'm 20 miles away. We have a 15-mile away and a 13-mile away approximately. So we've tried to spread them out. We have a military officer and we have a mother of several kids, and we want them to tell their story. We just went out to Talmadge Creek where he lives, and they put about a foot of sand over the oil. And when you look down, it's clear. You can see through the water to nice, beautiful sand, but you dig under the sand and oil gushes up. So, Sherry, can you come here, please? Sherry has several kids that are sick right now. She's going to read you something from her son.
Well, I live on Sisson. I guess I live like around 300 feet or so from the river. And most of my children have been sick since that day, or not exactly on that day, but shortly after. They all have breathing problems, and they can't go outside and play. My one son has a mysterious, we're calling it some type of leg weakness where, from a crouched position, he cannot get up. He needs help or to pull himself up. And he was a perfectly healthy 10-year-old boy who had no problems whatsoever. Now his eyes are red, like he's on drugs all the time. They're red. He's on like 3 different medications to try to make it better, and it's not making it better. The doctors run tests, all kinds of different tests on him since last January, trying to figure out what's wrong with my son, and they have no answers as to what's wrong with him. And I asked my 12-year-old boy if he could just write a little something down, that he felt, himself personally, what's wrong with him. And he wrote, "Since the oil spill, I can't remember stuff that happened a little while ago. I can't breathe as good. Since getting sick, I can't go outside. I've been sick a lot, getting headaches. I've gained 40 pounds since last year, and rashes, watery eyes, diarrhea. I wish we could move so I can go outside and not be sick." And I feel bad because, we're not on the higher end of money, so we can't just pick up and move. And my house is actually going to be paid off in a few payments, but it's like it's worthless because nobody wants to come down there. And I went months and months and months of very little to no sleep because they're running those big fan boats up and down the river, sounding like big drag races, and all he answers is run all these tests, and you know, I'm the 10-year-old, and they're not really sure what's wrong with me. So, and I didn't go there because I'm kind of scared. You know, I've heard of people, you know, that are threatened and stuff by Enbridge, so I haven't done anything to date. But we are still trying to find out what's wrong with my son. So I guess that's all I had to say.
Thank you. I told her I'd go with her. I'm not scared of her. All right, Steve. Steve Bridges called me up one day. He watched one of my videos, and he wanted to talk to me. So here you go, Steve. Ex-military officer.
I was 12 years in the military back in the 80s and early 90s. And we'd spill a gallon of oil from the bottom of our tanks, and it'd take like 3 weeks to clean the stuff out. It was unbelievable compared to this mess. I got up the morning of the spill, let our dogs out, and one of them promptly threw up, and then I followed. And we kept on throwing up until blood in it. We lost 2 of our dogs, my peacock, 50 hens, a couple of roosters, 8 rabbits, 7 or 8 of our cats. And the yard the next week, we lived up on G Drive North where River Road hits it. The yard had birds all over it, deadwoods. So there was a lot of aerial contaminants. On the other side of the road, probably we're in the floodplain, and that was, y'all remember how bad the flood was at that point? We're probably 150, 200 feet from the high level of the oil. And I've watched, my mother and I counted 400 trucks one day going in to fill their encapsulated oil. They're not removing it or cleaning it up. They cover it up with loads and loads of dirt, compacted dirt, they cover it with straw, and plant zinnias. They're not even planting grass, it's a bunch of zinnias and loads. I got the standard sick, the headache and stuff right after that, but I never thought of it. However, my health has gone down. I'm used to being never a doctor, but now I have fuzzy vision. Today is a real bad day. I wouldn't be driving if I hadn't told John I'd be here, because I get like ants crawling all through my skin. I've had boils break out since last year, in all sorts of places. I look like crazy. And falling like I really did. Whatever they got to us, I've never heard from Enbridge. It was because I'm trying to find out why. Like my mother, I go on a drive with her for 10 minutes from McDonald's to the farm, and she'll get the run so bad she messes herself, and I've been doing it too. There's just something very, very bad, nervous-wise. Like I'll go, my skin burns. My feet feel right now like I got needles in them in the joints. And that's why I was looking around for what it would be, and I knew there were toxic agents in the oil. And I started doing the research on the internet and found John last week, and he invited me here. But I'd be just as happy to have him start paying for this health shit. I just found last week there was a mandatory evacuation for 1,000 feet within the river. I don't know how many people got evacuated, but I did it. I didn't. It stunk, but I was out there working on the farm in the state. And it's showing now. As the gentleman said, your health, it doesn't, like a long distance run, you feel better after it. This, you don't feel better, so it's getting worse and worse and worse. And now I have to go in and get medical help. I've been used to staying away from doctors like the plague, and I don't think I'm going to be able to keep that up. John, you've not taken this from the stand.
Don't be sorry. It's not your fault. It's Enbridge's fault. Michelle was emailing Dr. Riki Ott and her assistant Lisa Marie, and she is going to introduce Riki today. Michelle's working her butt off for you guys. Every day she's trying to help me and you guys out.
Good
evening. My name is Michelle Brown-Smith. For those of you who don't know, I am a resident of Battle Creek. I live at Mobile Home Park. I've been there 4 years, and I watched all of my neighbors' health decline. I started yelling and screaming and trying to get evacuations. Some did, some didn't. And I've watched last year what has happened to my neighbor's health. So I had heard of Dr. Riki Ott way back when the Exxon Valdez happened. She is well known in the marine biology area, and I have friends that sing her praises. So I sent an email, and I got a response.
The PAHs affect the fetus, the baby in the womb. It can result in high miscarriages or problems with the child. Delayed growth, stunted growth, mental problems as well. Elders, our body is like a rain barrel, and throughout your whole life, that rain barrel fills up, drip, 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 with toxic chemicals. And your body's doing the best it can to try to break these things down and get them out. But as an elder or as an older person, you can just get overwhelmed. You know, your body can just get overwhelmed. It's fighting this, it's fighting that. It's maybe fighting some other chronic illnesses or health problems you have. And suddenly here comes an oil spill on top of everything else. And the spill can act as a triggering event where it can actually make other health problems worse. So, elders. African Americans, I'm really sorry to say, looking around the community here, because African Americans are prone to blood disorders anyway, sickle cell anemia, and the oil creates blood disorders or can make them worse. And finally, anybody with already existing health problems, because your system is already compromised and weakened. So, I mean, this is like a no-kidding situation here. In the Gulf, we had hands across the sand. The symptoms across the Gulf, stuffy nose, bad headache, sore throat, even blisters in the throat. Sorry. Hoarseness, dizziness, nausea, ear and nose bleeds. People would wake up in the morning with their pillow just soaked. Kids, adults, skin rashes. I have pictures of some of that. Peeling hands and soles of feet from walking in the sand. Blood in the urine, blood in the vomit, blood in the stool, blood everywhere, okay? Lethargy, fatigue, brain fog, that's something I haven't made, and I forgot, again, to put the eye problem on here, and diarrhea. Okay,
So what you're learning is it's when this all comes at you at once, who do you go to? The government's supposed to be there. The public officials are supposed to be there. Nobody's there. You're it. So the fact that you have come together as a community, I mean, with concerned citizens like Michelle and John and Susan, I mean, you are really it. You need to sign up on that form and you need to start organizing. That's what I hope to help you realize tomorrow, is that you can do this. There's communities across the nation that are organizing, because the only way you're going to get out of this is for you to figure it out. So let me share with you what this is, okay? And it's really more than Enbridge pipeline spilling in your backyard, okay? It's connected to the tar sands. It's connected all the way up to the White House with Energy Future. And it's the same as happened in the Gulf. It's not just an oil rig blowout. It's connected to what the plan was for our energy future. So sick people threaten the government's idea of what our energy future should be, and the oil industry's idea of what our energy future should be. And if the oil industry, of course you're thinking we have an oil future. So Michelle mentioned that I did spend a year in the Gulf. I certainly didn't mean to. It's hot down there. I tried to leave at the end of May, and I'll show you a picture of why I came back. But I'm going to talk a little bit first about 21 years, what changed, really what changed. And in the oil spill cleanup technology, zip, nothing. The upper left is a picture of Exxon Valdez, Prince William Sound. The black areas, the darker areas, that's water. Everything else is oil. So you can see the boom isn't really being too helpful there. And what do we have 21 years later? Boom, burning, and dispersants. The exact same thing. Do you really think the oil industry is using the same technology to get the oil out of the ground that they used 21 years ago? There's no, the oil industry really doesn't care about the incidental spills, no matter how big they are. They can, buy their way out of it. So, on the lower right, that's down in the marshes of Louisiana, and the oil has poured over the boom and flowed under the boom, and basically now the boom is trapping the oil against the marsh that it's supposed to be protecting. Okay? And what do I see when I come in on Amtrak? 21-year-old technology. There it all is again, 22 years. All right, so what does the industry do? The industry knows that it can't clean these spills up. And so it tries to control the story, hide the images, and minimize its own liability. And it does this. This is an image from the Gulf. Remember the Gulf disaster? Oh, we didn't spill anything. Oh, well, maybe 1,000 gallons a day. Maybe 5. Maybe, and what we, ultimately came up with was, the scientists are saying, based on the flow rate from the well pipe, probably 65,000 barrels a day from the beginning. The industry underestimates how much it spilled, and it self-reports, and the fines are based on how much it spilled. So of course they came up with a new understanding of science that, oh my gosh, oil's more toxic to wildlife than we thought. In the 1970s, when we passed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, science changed. It's sort of like the world is flat, and then you have somebody go sail around, you go, oh my God, the world is round, right? Well, oil is not going to cause long-term effects until you look for long-term effects, which is what our blockade forced the government to do, right? So here's the difference in these 20 years of studies. And this is information that we can use for people too, and I'm going to get into people right next. The focus shifted from the volatile organic compounds, benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, xylene, stuff that volatilizes into the air, to the heavier stuff, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. That's what tar sands is concentrated with, are these PAHs. They're just a heavier fraction of oil than the stuff that goes up into the air really quickly. The studies shifted from just being in the lab and saying, oh, we only got these beakers of animals, I got a 4-day test, there's no long-term effects, to, oh my gosh, if you look at multiple species over multiple generations, there's long-term effect. And the whole scientific community shifted from oil is toxic at parts per million to parts per billion. That's 1,000 times more toxic than we thought. This means basically that none of our laws right now are sufficiently protective of the environment because the laws didn't change. The science did. So, oil's more toxic to wildlife. What about people? Well, here we have all these people working the beaches, in our case, and the difference between Exxon Valdez and now is that in this 20 years, we had the same sort of scientific wake-up call that we had with the wildlife. Oil is also more toxic to people. But in Exxon Valdez, we didn't quite know that. This is kind of the first shot across the bow that there's a problem. And I kept on with the workers and kept studying this. And basically, this high-pressure hot water wash that we did bounced the oil off the rocks into the air, and people breathed it. So what you see on the reindeer is what was in their lungs. And it got called the Valdez crud. There were 6,722 workers that reported were sick enough to jeopardize their high-paying cleanup job to report that they had a health problem. This is 2 of every 3 cleanup workers. This is a worker health epidemic, okay? Or it should have been recognized as that. It was not. Exxon did the medical. Exxon said Valdez crud, cold, flu. You'll feel better when you go home. And what we're finding over these 2 decades is the workers did not get better. They were sick. They went to the point of being disabled and to the point of being dead. And there's this whole continuum of everybody in between, including people who can live with it, but it definitely they notice that their health is not the same, and it never will be. I had one guy tell me, he can't even use Crest toothpaste because if he by mistake inhales while he's brushing his teeth, it sets off a wheezing attack in his lungs. It's chemical sensitivity. So Okay, 14 years after Exxon Valdez, I worked with some graduate student at Yale, and as an intern, a summer intern, and she became so interested in this problem that she went back and she did a thesis on this. So she did a pilot health study, a survey, 14 years later. And the short-term effects, cold and flu-like symptoms, respiratory problems, headaches, skin rashes, she did all that. What did she find 14 years later? Well, she found there were long-term effects, and these are self-reported effects. But basically, we're talking respiratory damage, CNS, central nervous system damage. So that's like headaches, dizziness, nausea, upset gut, tingly appendages, chemical sensitivities like I shared with you. That was high enough to be significant, mathematically significant in her sample size, okay? And then she found a whole host of other stuff. Blood disorders that almost made it mathematically to be significant. Liver, kidney, skin problems, reproductive problems, immune suppression. And let's see. I have a clip from the movie Black Whale, which is here. It's in your community, and we're going to figure out how to show that, not tonight. But this is a clip from it, from one of the workers who was a foreman, and I wanted you to hear this in her own words.
And still now, 20 years later, I'm getting phone calls from sick workers who are seeking help. No one knew what they were doing out there. They were just thrown in from all walks of life, and our equipment was lousy, and so you just had to work with what you had. And like everybody else, I was wanting to do something to help. And so I signed on and went out. Much to my surprise, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. On the buried trailer, there was 180 people. They would do their work of spraying every day, 12 hours, 16 hours a day. It was like a war zone out there. And that steam is coming up all over everywhere. Everybody who came through my area to go to work, I would feel responsible for their welfare. They were weary, they were coughing, and it was constant, and even headaches and upset stomachs. I was always getting bronchitis. It would not go away. I was coughing, my chest, and I was always on medication. I've been healthy all my life. Going from someone who's very outdoorsy, working in the garden, to having to minimize my actions has really been a step down for me. And the most important thing that Exxon felt at that time was just to make a public appearance of cleaning the oil, and they didn't care. Because if they had, they would have taken care of us better.
Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Merle is still alive. She's in Nevada, and her website is silenceinthesound.com. She wrote a little book about her experience. I was also in South Korea 1 year after the Heavy Spirit oil spill, and this is some of the best to date study on both the workers, but the workers happened to be residents. It was largely volunteers who, so community residents, Taeyeon, who responded to this. And a year later, they reported, the University of South Korea in Seoul reported respiratory damage, central nervous system damage, and even chromosome damage, DNA damage, just from breathing the fumes. Just from breathing the fumes. And what this study concluded was, this happened right at Christmas break, so a lot of students, high school, university students came to help with the cleanup. I hate calling it a cleanup, it's more like a cover-up, I mean, right? And unfortunately, the children don't have as
well-developed a system in their bodies to break down. It just doesn't mature. It doesn't fully form until you're an adult. So they can't handle these toxic chemicals very well. And secondly, children also are breathing more rapidly. They breathe faster than adults, so they're getting a higher volume of pollution in their bodies, and their bodies are littler, right? So basically, you know, when you go to the store and you buy medicine there's kid doses and there's adult doses. So what I'm saying is, when the kids went on this cover-up, they got an adult dose of poison, right? So children are more susceptible than adults. So what's happened in the 20 years here, I want to do is get it off the surface because it looks bad, get it down. And in the Gulf they use dispersants. I am not sure what they used here. The trick to ask would be chemical. What products did you use? Because dispersants were actually designed for salt water. So the point is, these dispersants tend to be just as toxic, or the chemical products can be, when combined with the oil, actually create a more toxic situation for up in the air and in the water, and to the people. One of the things to control the story and control the damage is sick people. The industry does not want to hear about sick people. So just by way of comparison, down in the Gulf, this was given to me by one of the workers who was medevaced off his boat with his crew at the end of May, which is why I turned around in Seattle and went back. There were 9 workers medevaced off their boats, and they said, please come back. That is a fire boom, and that is the burning oil in the background. These people were not given respirators, all right? And they came with coughs and headaches and bleeding, internal bleeding, throwing up, same as you. Eyes, the burning eyes. When they got ashore, the doctors diagnosed them with heat stroke, food poisoning, dizziness. They still have these symptoms over 1.5 years later. Clearly, it's not food poisoning and heat stroke, okay? So, when citizen groups raised money and got respirators and gave them to the workers for free, the workers didn't have to buy them. The workers took them out to their boat. And I say workers, I mean people's husbands and people's sons, you know? This is the fishermen initially. And so the family's concerned. BP told the workers, if you use these respirators, your jobs will be terminated. And in the safety training, the reason was, and this was slipped to me by one of the safety training officials, okay, we've got the government not providing respirators. The government's done air samples, and there's no need to worry, so therefore you don't need respirators. And if anybody wants a respirator, well, tell us so we can reassign them. That's what they put in writing. What they told people out of their mouths when they're doing these safety trainings is, if you want to wear a respirator, your job will be terminated. And that is because BP did not want to be liable for the long-term medical monitoring of these people, because they know darn well they don't have heat stroke and food poisoning. This is chemical illness, and it might be a lifetime problem. So, basically this is all about, these two are tar sands and the other one's offshore drilling. This is about getting back to oil business as usual, as fast as possible. So, as Lisa Jackson, the administrator of EPA, told me to my face, we don't want to create a panic. Okay? So a panic, in my worldview, is an informed public that knows what's going on and actually calls the government on holding these companies accountable, because guess what? If we really had to hold them accountable, we would be looking for something else for our energy future, because as we get to the bottom of our barrel of cheap, easy to access oil, the industry is starting to be pushed into areas where it's more dangerous. It's more risky to the environment, it's more risky in terms of health. And who pays for that? The industry doesn't want to. So it's us right now. And I did a little bit of reading before I came here, not nearly enough, but I learned that your wetlands have a clay barrier.
And we have the same thing on the beaches of Prince William Sound, and it kept the oil from going away. It couldn't sink down, and this is what our beaches still look like. I'm just going to mute that. We dig a pit about 1.5 feet down and pour a bucket of seawater into the pit, and the oil is so thick still that it goes down into the pit and then rises to the surface. That video was taken 17 years later on beaches that were officially clean, declared clean by the U.S. Coast Guard, the state of Alaska, and Exxon. Okay? And we have a lot of indigenous people in Alaska who do subsistence hunting and fishing and gathering, and they can't go to these beaches. And they're the ones that raise the stink and help get these beaches studied. But ultimately, we all ended up raising the stink community-wide. And I have 3 slides about wildlife, and wildlife is important, and animals, even domestic. I mean, I heard about the peacocks, and I want to talk to you a little bit more, but the point here is that when I got into this, and I had workers calling me starting in May of 1989, and I mean, still to this day, okay? People were, describing these health impacts, and it wasn't until the ecosystem collapsed and we got through all that, but I started calling medical doctors, and I found out Dr. Ray down in Dallas, Texas. He treated a lot of the Exxon Valdez workers, and he said, when you have sick people and you have sick animals, and they're sick because of the same chemical, that's the strongest evidence possible for court to prove that that chemical is a problem. Okay, because our bodies basically are drawing on the same functions. So you have sick animals and sick people. So 1993, back up, 89, we were told there will be no long-term problem. Don't worry, okay? And the fishermen worried, that's our job. And I was commercial fishing at the time. And we worried about what would happen to all the little baby fish. Would they grow up? I mean, their whole nursery was covered in oil. And so we decided we would wait and see. And sure enough, 4 years later, when the babies were supposed to become adults, the ecosystem collapsed, okay? So, different presidents, different stories in the news, media long gone. How do we get the nation's attention? We, as a community, blockaded Valdez Narrows, and we held up oil tanker traffic, which was 25% of the nation's domestic oil. This is only 100 fishing boats. Our community is 2,500 people. We did have the women and children. We had our community out there, and we held for 3 days, okay? That shows you the power of a community. We got, there was armed gunboats heading our way, and oil tankers doing donuts in the Gulf of Alaska, and the president's like, okay, wait, women and children, gunboats, this is not good. And so we were demanding ecosystem studies to find out, to give us the science to argue in court what was killing our fishery. And basically this is it. As you saw in that pit, the oil's just under the surface. It comes up, the shellfish soak it up. Other things eat the shellfish, or in the case of the salmon and the herring, there's little baby eggs and fish right in this oil, and they just didn't make it, okay? Or if they ate the contaminated shellfish, the poison was transferred through the food web. And still to this day, so all the way up, mammals, fish, birds, everything. The pink salmon recovered. It took 10 years, about 5 generations of these fish. And the herring has still not come back, 22 years later, okay? So the focus shifted. It's not outside the body like, back in the 70s, 60s, gosh, you look at someone, they look a little sick, oh, you take their temperature. That's about it, right? Now the science, the medical doctors know how to get into our cells, and they can look and see that, oh, these PAHs, they jam cell function. They jam DNA coding. They jam synthesis of reproductive hormones. They jam, they cause reproductive problems beyond the endocrine disruption. They even jam...
I live at Baker's, and there's been oil there for a year. And they said it was clean last September, but I'm here to tell you it wasn't. I have sores every day. I break up with little sores. It takes months for it to heal. I had COPD at stage 1, and I was able to manage that for 10 years. And now it's up to stage 3. And they said that we'll investigate it. You know, while they're investigating, I'm not going to be here.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm on 4 different types of steroids. I'm on 2 different antibiotics. I used to take 2 pills a day. Now I'm up to 15. And they'll investigate it.
You're not easy, you're tired all the time, you're fatigued all the time. That's the level of sophistication of medical science now, right? So that's what's shifting. Oil is more toxic because the medical science now understands our bodies better and is able to measure at these very low levels. That's another thing. We couldn't measure, the scientific community couldn't measure low levels before. We stopped at parts per thousand.
Thing is this thing that boils almost, that break out, and then they just ooze, and they just take really months and months to go away, if they go away. And they can reoccur, and they're not contagious. Yet they're being diagnosed as scabies and the things that are contagious. All right? So again, there's misdiagnoses going on. Part of the problem here, I'll just say, is that there are oil-eating bacteria that occur naturally. And when there's an oil spill, there's more of them because they're trying to eat the oil. So what's your skin? Yeah, oil, hydrocarbons. And there's also oil-eating bacteria that are artificial, that have been genetically modified or altered to eat oil better. So what would that do to your skin? Eat it better, okay? And none of this has really been tested on people. Yeah, but it was unleashed in the Gulf. And I haven't snooped around here too much to find out what's been unleashed, but I bet you they're not out there with soap and water, okay? Okay, so people got tired in the Gulf of being told there's no problem. I would walk into communities and people would say, wait, I can smell it. It's making my throat. I can't even talk. I'm hoarse, you know? It's making my eyes burn. Why is EPA telling us there's no problem? What is going on? And finally people said, what can we do? And that's what I live for. And my answer to that is, what do you want to do? And what came out of community after community in the Gulf was, well, can we do our own air samples? Can we do our own water quality samples? So there were nonprofit organizations like the Waterkeeper Alliance or like Louisiana Environmental Action Network. I think they're nonprofit organizations here too. I mean, I just got here. But the thing to do is kind of start working together. These are not things you necessarily need to pay for, but you can take them. And there's a way to take them where they'll actually be legitimate samples, and they get to a lab and they get analyzed. And lo and behold, what people were finding was on the beach pole umbrellas, on the umbrellas themselves, on the marsh grasses, on the airplanes that were flying over, in the rain, on their door stoop, in their outdoor swimming pools. This stuff was going up in the air and coming down in the rain. Yeah. And let me see what I have here. I think I have Ira Lifer yet. This is a NASA.
And we headed out toward Louisiana.
Oh, no, we're going to skip this one. This is wildlife. So the oil is also on land. The oil is cleaned up to a standard of what is visible, all right? Which is part of what's going on with dumping, dumping, dumping. We can't see it, out of sight, out of mind, okay? Well, there was a graduate student in the Gulf who started to realize if oil and dispersants were mixed together, and they were, that at night they fluoresce. So that's the same beach, but you can actually see the oil. It's all that orange colored stuff, that cantaloupe colored stuff. And this is what a beach, a white, beautiful white sand beach during the day, this is what it looks like at night. So people who were out walking on these beaches thinking everything was fine, gosh, they get a skin rash, they don't know why, they've been told the beach is okay. This is a pit that was dug down with a regular light on it, and then there again with a fluorescent. And in the Gulf, you know, it's really hot down there, my God. I thought I was gonna melt. But anyway, the oil did melt, okay? It melted on the sand and it went down to where it was cooler and it coagulated again, and that's that orange line that's about 10 inches down. Well, 10 inches, what are kids with buckets who are happily digging a pit?
There was one water quality sample taken from the kid was still in the pit. News station swooped down, grabbed the water quality sample. It blew up in the lab because it had so much chemical in it, dispersive. So, you know, it's not clean. And then people started asking me, how can I prove that I'm sick because of what I'm finding in the air, what we're finding in the air and the water? So I introduced the concept of blood samples. There's a volatile solvent profile that Metamatrix does. And actually Exxon Valdez time, I worked with the guy who designed that test, but he retired and he sold it. So that test can take a sample of blood and figure out what's in it, basically. And the people in the Gulf are testing, looking for oil, specifically, through the biomarkers and through the oil itself. Biomarkers being the enzymes that our body produces to try to break down these chemicals. People in the Gulf had oil in their blood upper 95th to 100 percentile. In other words, average Americans, you know, you've got this whole curve, they're way over here, way over. I mean, they have to be in the middle of an oil refinery. What we have in the Gulf now is a disconnect, and Confederacy of Fences is actually a book in the Gulf, but the medical doctors in the Gulf, what they're diagnosing is on that side. Heat stroke, food poisoning, acid reflux, scabies, staph infections, strep throat, depression, mono. One of the guys who has mono goes, mono, isn't that a kid disease, kissing disease? I'm like, yeah. On the other side is what maybe they really have from chemical illness. And we're still in the middle of this story. What two of the doctors in the Gulf have told me is that the insurance companies are not paying for chemical illness because it's not recognized by OSHA, which is true so far. So if the insurance companies won't pay, the doctors won't get reimbursed if they really tell you what it is that you have. Great. Just great. Right? That means doctors are doing no more harm twice. They're violating that Hippocratic oath twice. They're not telling you what you have, and then they're treating you for something you don't have. Great, and you're not getting better. So, okay, so I think the oil does not just stay put. Once it gets in the air, it travels. Once it gets in the river, show that these volatile organic compounds in a 3-knot breeze can travel 30 miles. So just 700 feet, 1,000 feet? I don't think so. Way past that, there's problems. What levels? Well, in the boats that people were working on, people measured 800 parts per million. These are the volatile organic compounds. In people's homes, early in the morning, high levels, 108 parts per million. I'm going to tell you what these levels, how they relate in a second. What the people found is that there was an air inversion that's set up. So cold air trapped the warm air, and the warm air, the pollutants built up. But by 9:30 in the morning, this colder air mass had heated up, so the chemicals all went away. So people were measuring at 9 o'clock in the morning, EPA's measuring at 10 o'clock, and getting 0.
That's what they did here.
Yeah. And then they're stopping at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Or when they got called on that, then they started doing 24-hour, but they didn't do it continuous, they did it. So if you take one high reading at night or early in the morning, and you get a bunch of zeros, and you average all of that, what does that really boil down to? Low, right? Okay, so with workers, the safety level is 5 parts per million for 15-minute exposure unprotected. Okay? You need a respirator over 5, and you need supplied air, oxygen, over 50 parts per million of these PAHs. Otherwise, this is like a lethal situation. All right, with public health, because public is not supposed to be in the middle of, these high exposures, 1 part per million for 8 hours before you get health effects. 1. Well, 8 hours, there you are, sleeping at night, and you're getting 100. So this is a little thing to show you, okay, now don't panic, okay? But here's the volatile organic carbon benzene, toluene, ethylbenzeneziide. But really what I want to show you here is across the top, the acute, intermediate, and chronic, to show you how that changes. You can be exposed to 1 part per million for 8 hours, and you can get just as sick as a person who's exposed basically to 0.1 part per million for up to 2 weeks. See, if you get a lower level over a longer time, you can get just as sick. And then the far column is 0.01, or 0.1 basically. Oh, I think there's supposed to be another O in there. It drops. The level drops the longer the time. But you can get just as sick. Chronic is up to a year. So this is a person from the Gulf. People in the Gulf have already died. This is Lisa Nelson, Orange Beach. And this is a YouTube that's up. This picture was taken a couple of weeks before the big blow up.
Lisa Nelson.
And what do you do?
I used to be a massage therapist when I could work.
And where did you work?
At a salon right on the beach.
And when did you stop working there?
When I was unable to because of the symptoms of whatever I got.
And your face appears to be quite swollen.
It's about 3 times its size. And so is my neck.
What's the bruising on your chest?
I don't know. It just appeared.
And is it only up high? Is it elsewhere?
No, it's down here too. It's all around my diaphragm.
And it's over on the side?
Yeah.
And when did this all start?
Well, I was having problems before, but on the 22nd...
You need to sit down?
On the 22nd of September, I went out to see that full moon come up on the harvest moon. And that night, when I got home, I had a major attack of my throat and head. It felt like knives were sticking in my throat, and my throat closed up. And ever since then, I have not been able to talk. That's been since the 22nd of September.
And have you seen the doctor?
I've seen I've been to the doctor 5 times.
And what have they said?
I have been on enough prednisone to kill a horse. And I have had 2 shots. And I have been on 4 different kinds of antibiotics. And nothing is touching this at all.
And what was it Dr. Purdue?
Okay, so this goes on a bit, but basically the doctors don't have a clue. And why? Because she's going to general practice doctors and the OEM doctors are just, they're not around. Now, you have the luck of having a university right in Detroit and a hospital that does have specialty in OEM, occupational and environmental medicine doctors. But, I mean, this is serious, okay? This is not your normal headache, sore throat, cold, right? This is serious. This is chemical illness. So, 2 more slides, and then I want to hear from you all. Now, think of this in terms of what you're being told in terms of health, public health, all right? Because I just saw, I didn't have enough time to read thoroughly the submerged oil study and the acute health study. And it talks about formulas and theoretical cancer risk, okay? And we have the exact same thing play out in the Gulf with the seafood, where, oh my gosh, we've got this well capped, 6 months later, let's open the fisheries. I mean, the ocean is full of oil, and suddenly the seafood is safe to eat. Really? How did the FDA do that? Well, the FDA set this criteria that dispersant use was stopped, that there was no visible sheen for 30 days. I'm not kidding. I was in one whole high school gym of fishermen, and one of the fishermen finally just said, you know, I'm a coon-ass, not a dumbass. He says the fish aren't at the surface, the crabs aren't at the surface, the oysters aren't at the surface, and neither are the shrimp. They're at the bottom where the oil is, right? It's just this incredible frustration. And they have 40-year-old tests. So the response to all this is dispersant use wasn't stopped. So what about visible oil sheen? And there's outdated methods, but here's the real kick. Even with sort of assumptions that weren't valid, the standard formula for seafood safety didn't work. The oil was too high. So the federal government, the FDA, increased the amount of oil that Gulf seafood could have by a factor of 10, and increased the cancer risk of people in the Gulf by a factor of 10, and said, look there, now the seafood's safe. And I was actually in Biloxi at another meeting of fishermen when this happened, and I read this article to the people, and then I looked at them. And finally one person said to me, but Miss Riki, I don't understand. Aren't we as important as people in Oregon and California? Because their seafood, doesn't have the 10 times factor. Well, aren't you all as important as anybody else in America? Doesn't your health matter? So, one last slide, and this slide, it's a video, and it's more to show you the scale of the problem. Because even though you're in a little community, really what we've tangled here with is the energy future of our nation.
A report out today by our scientists show that the vast majority of the spilled oil has been dispersed or removed from the water. So the long battle to stop the leak and contain the oil is finally close to coming to an end.
The good news is that the vast majority of the oil appears to be gone.
The vast majority of the oil has either evaporated or been burned, skimmed, or dispersed.
5 million barrels that went into the water as a result of this spill. There's still a quarter of it out in the water.
That quarter will weather, it will break down naturally. Mother Nature will do her part.
Mother Nature is helping assist the federal effort.
Mother Nature.
Mother Nature is assisting.
Is it safe to say that it appears to be working well, but we don't know what the long-term consequences are of the chemicals that were put in to disperse the oil?
I think that what we do know is important. One, that the dispersants did work.
We already had some seafood in the White House when the New Orleans Saints came up. We had a couple of po' boys. So right now we're feeling pretty
good. This is the last word. So the purpose of that video was to show you the power of the oil companies, basically. This is what we're up against, all the way up to the White House. 25% of the oil, that whole report was discredited much later. It's 75% of the oil was still there. It flipped it around. And Mother Nature is not going to help in a 6-month period. It's Exxon Valdez. That oil, the scientists are telling us it's going to be there for another 50 years. So this is what we're up against. And really, tonight I just was thinking we'd talk about health and any questions you all had. And tomorrow, maybe you can tell your friends and we can start figuring out what Battle Creek, Michigan, and any other communities that you're from, what we can actually do about this, or if somebody can't come tomorrow night, let's do questions. That's what I live for. So thank you all for coming so far. Yes.
Okay, one of the times I talked with Enbridge and stuff about my health, they come out and they said this
of doctors or of MDs and okay, I've got a whole bunch of doctors that I can call. I've got lawyers around the country asking me for doctors. And so what I can do is, and I don't want to take on a whole lot of stuff, but I think that's one thing that I can do, is get the names, and then you guys can start following up.
Hello, Riki Ott. What do you think that you learned or helped us with at the Michigan oil spill?
Pretty much what I did in the Gulf, which is drawing people together and having people realize that their real strength is in themselves. It's not waiting for the government to help you or waiting for Enbridge to help you. It's really about how can we organize as a community what it is that we want, rather than hearing what Enbridge will do for us or not do, what the government can or can't do, as in, we really can't help you with any of the health stuff. No, what is it that people want, and how are we going to get what we want as a community, not as individuals, but by grouping together and using leverage points with the media, with the politicians, and with our own selves, with our own community and social networking.
what is it that we want, and how can we get it?
Thank you, Riki. You've helped me because I've been doing this by myself for a long time, and it's taken somebody like you to try to teach us that we all need to come together and be a team, and I thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm excited actually about what's happened here. I feel like I've planted a seed, and judging by everybody's faces and enthusiasm, we've got a bunch of tasks assigned, and I think it's just going to grow from here.
Yeah, well, thank you, Riki, so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate it.